Right, hello everyone, and welcome to my review for Robert Kirkman's Invincible. Here I've got Compendium 1, and this is going to be sort of a new review series on the channel now that Preacher is finished. So, I have read all of Invincible, and let me tell you, I absolutely loved it. This might be my favourite superhero story of all time. So, just before I start this review, I'll do a quick non-spoiler talk, and then we'll get into a lot of spoilers. So, my non-spoiler review is that I love this book and this series. The way you see Mark Grayson's character develop throughout the 15 years or however long the series was ongoing is incredible. Like the way you see him grow from being a boy to a man, and this full book, this first compendium, really shows that. You see where he started and like how his character kind of develops into what he becomes ultimately at the end of Compendium 3. So without spoiling anything, I would definitely recommend Invincible. If I was to give it a rating, like 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, like honestly, it's so good. And now let's just get into the spoiler talk. So, I kind of got introduced to Invincible through Amazon Prime's TV show and watched it all, finished season 1, and it was one of those, like I watched the last episode and I was like, right, I have to read the comic. So, the story follows Mark Grayson, 17 years old, and he is the son of Omni-Man, the world's most powerful superhero. Issue 1 opens and he's carrying a guy with a bomb strapped to his chest through the Antarctic. What I loved about Invincible was just the little things. So you see him working at Burger Mart and he goes to take the trash out and throws it and it just goes up into into space. Just like in the show, so I'm not going to talk too much about specifics because the show has kind of covered most of what happens in here. We see Mark get his costume from art. We see him try and take down Titan at first. And so yeah, issue 1 ends with him actually being in his suit and just taking down criminals. Then issue 2, we start with the backstory of Nolan Grayson, and he tells young Mark about the planet Viltrum, and Mark's still trying to learn how to use his powers. And he comes across a team called the Teen Team, who are sort of like a Teen Titans-esque kind of thing. You'd have Rexplode, Robot, Duplicate, Atom Eve, and Mark kind of becomes a bit close with Eve, and that's something that we really get to see flesh out through the rest of the story, so I really enjoyed it. And yeah, we just see him try and stop this guy who is strapping bombs to people's chests, and they wake up in malls and then all of a sudden the mall just explodes. So you have sort of that story going on, but then you have massive threats of world domination from like alien planets, and just like he's only just started out, so for him to try and be doing this whilst, you know, trying to still learn stuff from his dad. So yeah, the Flaxans invade, and that was something in the show that was done quite different. They invade in the city and everyone kind of takes them down, whereas here it was just Omni-Man and Invincible, and you kind of see Omni-Man let out his Viltrumite rage, and Mark kind of looks at him for a minute and he's like kind of taken back a bit. So within these first few issues, Mark's still just training, still trying to get the hang of his powers, and Mark and Eve, they manage to find who it is doing it and take him down. And one thing that I really enjoyed from that was the fact that they managed to get changed at school and then just fly straight up, and Mark's like, why, how can you be so sure that no one's going to see you? And Eve just says, well, nobody ever looks up. And I quite liked that. So within this sort of like first few issues, you have Mark really building a relationship with someone called Amber while still learning about his powers. And you have sort of, I don't want to say like monsters of the week, but you have like individual issues where there's like certain things that are just done for that issue, but then ultimately will come back later, like the Reanimen, and like Alan the Alien, you meet him, but then obviously he has a much bigger story later on. Something I loved from this was Midnight City. We get to see Darkwing in action, and this was something that isn't shown in the TV show, but it's a city that was cursed by a wizard, and it's perpetual midnight, so he's literally like a Batman type character taking down all these guys, and then they leave the city limits and it's broad daylight. I really liked that. And I quite liked also seeing a bit more backstory to the Guardians of the Globe before they're ultimately killed. And so that comes in issue 7 of a like 140 something odd series, they're killed in issue 7, which is like, okay. So obviously I knew that was going to happen because, like I say, I watched the TV show, but yeah, it was quite interesting to see it happen that early on. And something more about this is Damien Darkblood. So in the show, if you've watched that, Damien Darkblood is like this big like character that's this investigator all the way through. In this, literally investigates the death of the Guardians of the Globe and then goes to the people and he's like, I've worked it out, I know who it is. And they're like, yeah, we know. Like, we found out weeks ago. So that was really interesting. I thought that was really cool. And then it all kind of comes to a head in issue 10. And the issue ends with Nolan uttering the famous words to Mark saying, we need to talk, after killing Immortal again. And it sets up issue 11, in which you learn the truth about Viltrum, and that they sort of just like conquer planets and conquer worlds, and that's why Nolan is on Earth, to conquer Earth for the Viltrumite Empire. And so Mark tries to talk to him, and we get to see Nolan's backstory, we get to see his time on Earth and how it might have changed him. But ultimately, he's still gone through and killed the Guardians of the Globe, and now he's asking Mark to join him because he's a Viltrumite. But Mark, you know, kind of being more human than Viltrumite, he says that I'm not going to let you take over this Earth, and I've been raised here. What on Earth? Like, no, of course I'm not going to help you. And then issue 11 ends with them gearing up to fight. So issue 11 kind of is a big information dump almost, and then issue 12 we just get the brawl between Omni-Man and his son Mark. And Omni-Man, like, during this fight, I'm reading this back now, like, as I've read the full story, so I know like how his character develops more. But when he says things like "your mother means nothing to me," and says she's like little more than a pet and stuff, and it's just like, this is rough. But the fight, to see him beat his own like son so much, and to see him nearly kill his son, and the only reason he doesn't is because when he's got him down on the floor and he's like, what will you have after 500 years? And Mark just says, you. I don't know, it kind of speaks a bit more to Nolan's humanity that he's managed to kind of develop over the past 17 years or 20 years, however long he's been on Earth. And he flies away and leaves Mark in his own blood, just like in the show. I remember that episode ended and, oh yeah, that was really when it was like, damn. So after that, we're introduced to characters like Cecil. So then we see the Flaxans try to invade Earth again, and this time the new Guardians of the Globe take them down, and everyone's just kind of dealing with everything that happened with Omni-Man, you know. Debbie Grayson, Mark's mom, is just, she's distraught, and you would be, you know. But one of the things that really stuck with me in this was that her character in these opening kind of like years, I guess, when Robert Kirkman was writing. I mean, you have to bear in mind this was written in 2003 to begin with, finished in 2018. But in 2003, one of the things with Debbie's character was she wasn't written particularly well in these first few, like 20 issues or whatever. And it was really nice to see her develop more as a character later on and be given more to do and just become much more of a better character, better fleshed out. And it's something that I'm really glad they did in the show from the beginning. I'm glad that she has that kind of backstory and kind of like is given more to do. Because in this, which issue is it? In this issue 14 ends with her crying on the floor and Mark comforts her and she just says, why did you drive him away? And I understand that she was in love with Nolan, but to say that to your own son is just, it's horrible. And then yeah, I was quite confused because issue 16 starts with Invincible saying like resist and die and trying to take over the world, and a guy called Angstrom Levy manages to escape with the help of the team and the Guardians of the Globe before being killed by Nolan and Invincible. And I was kind of reading this, I was like, what? And then Angstrom Levy's pulled through a portal by another version of himself. And this was when things kind of really went off the rails and things kind of really, yeah, became like balls to the wall mental. But it turns out that it's different versions of Mark, different realities in which Mark may have been raised a Viltrumite or Mark may have sided with his father. So it's cool to see that, but at the same time it's weird how you have your character, you're building him up, and then in issue 16 you see an evil version of him, and you see that he can be a flawed character. He's not 100% good through and through, and he's not like a Captain America type where in every reality will be a good hero or something like that. So it's really interesting to see. But something I mentioned earlier, something that comes up in this issue was Damien Darkblood comes to the Pentagon and says, I need to speak with Cecil, I know Omni-Man killed the Guardians of the Globe, and the secretary just laughs at him and says, yeah, we all know that. So things kind of build with Angstrom Levy, and Mark's dating Amber, and it's really interesting to actually see time pass. You know, you see him graduate, you see him develop relationships, everything like that. You see him become stronger and stronger as a hero. And something I really enjoyed, some kind of running gag, was so when Mark graduates he throws his cap into the air and it flies off into space just like the bin bag that did earlier. And then you see it land in London and these people are kind of worshipping the sky, like something has fallen from the sky and they don't know what it is. I thought that was quite funny. And then we just get side stories like when he goes to Mars and the Sequids or Sequids, how do you pronounce it? I always pronounced it Sequids, but I think it might be Sequids. I have no idea. And we just get a lot of really cool things going on in this book. You have reoccurring characters like the Reanimen come back, and you have Darkwing, well, a new version of Darkwing who, after being killed by the Guardians of the Globe, this new version of Darkwing came and is just murdering people. He's this like criminal that's just murdering everyone. So Invincible goes to Midnight City to try and fight him. And he has these weird like portal powers where he can go into like, I don't know what you even call it, but just like another realm, and then tries to take Invincible in there, but Invincible just holds on to his arm. He's like, I'm not going to let you go because as soon as I do, you're going to leave me in it. So, you know, it's quite funny. I really enjoy how Mark is kind of a character that won't just punch first and ask questions later. He, unlike his dad, and you see that with Alan, when he's fighting Alan, he comes to Earth and he's like, oh, this isn't Uraf, because Mark has taken the time to just talk to him and ask him why he's doing this. So something that's kind of sticks out to me a little bit is reading this back through the artwork at the start. Cory Walker's art is just, it's strange because Ryan Ottley takes over. So Ryan Ottley takes over after issue 7, and his art changes so much throughout the rest of the story. It kind of develops more and more, gets better and better. So it's strange to see Cory Walker's initial art. Yeah, I just wanted to add that in. And then something that really made me laugh whilst watching this was Science Dog, who is a character that Mark reads a comic of. One day just turns up at his door and he's like, what is this? Like, and flies up and he's like, you're not real. How are you real? So it's like if we were one day Alan the Alien turned up at my front door and was just like, oh hey, it's like, you're not real, you're a comic character, what are you doing? So I found that really funny. I'm hoping they do that in the show because that was great. And then it turns out that it's not Science Dog, surprise surprise, it is a fly-like creature that I believe is called a Thraxon. I can't remember if they say it here, but I think later on in the story they say it's a Thraxon. And so yeah, Mark goes to this planet with this fly creature, and in issue 26 sees his dad again for the first time since, you know, he tried to kill him on Earth. And the first thing Mark does is clenches his fist, and Nolan clenches his, and then Mark just cries and gives him a hug. Because it's his dad, and after everything that happened it must have been so weird for him, and it has been weird for his mom as well, and Mark trying to comfort his mom whilst also dealing with everything of being a superhero. And I was glad that they actually hugged it out and spoke rather than just going back to fighting. Something that made me laugh there, I've said this before, is they're walking through the planet and Nolan's explaining everything to Mark, and Mark punches him in the back of the head. And Nolan turns around. He's like, "What did you do that for?" And Mark says, "I saw these things can do the masking thing. I saw that they did it with Science Dog. I just needed to make sure it was you." So he just whacks him in the back of the head. And then Mark is introduced to his brother, who Nolan has got with one of these fly women and created a son. Now it turns out that these fly people, the Thraxon, they live for 9 months at a time. So when Mark meets his brother, he's already like the size of a 2-3-year-old. despite only being alive for a couple weeks or something, or months. We see what's happening back on Earth, and Mark kind of has to come to terms with his brother and that his dad has a new son. And that was something that I was really interested in when I read it. I was like, okay, either this character's going to get killed off straight away, or he's going to grow up a bit and then get killed off and it'll destroy Mark because they'll come to know him, or he'll just be around for the rest of the book. And I was like, not hoping, because obviously I don't want to say I'm hoping that he dies, but I was like, this is weird that it's kind of introduced a brother for Mark. So yeah, it was strange. And then some Viltrumites attack the planet, and Mark he's stronger than he was, but he's nowhere near fast enough or strong enough to take on Viltrumites. So he's trying to just outrun them with his brother in his arms and his brother's mum. But he's flying as fast as he can, and the Viltrumites are still catching up with him, and so Nolan has to swoop in and protect him. But obviously Nolan can't fight 3 Viltrumites at once. So that was a really tense issue to see the Viltrumites slaughter this entire planet that Nolan's been living on, that Nolan's kind of become the emperor on. And yeah, and just to see how it pisses off Nolan and how he's so quick to turn his rage just towards anyone. So he like turns around and grabs Mark by the throat. But yes, it was really tense. It was really cool to see them try and fight these Viltrumites. Ultimately, they're defeated and Nolan's taken away, bloodied and battered. Mark is bloody and battered and just left on this planet to recover in his own time, just left there. And the last thing that Nolan says to him is, read my books. So in the time that passes, Mark helps to rebuild this planet that was slaughtered, and he kind of develops more of a relationship with his brother, and then comes back to Earth and shows up with his mom with this purple brother, and he's like, I don't know what to do, but can you just look after him? So yeah, Debbie's character, this is what I'm saying, like she's in these first few issues just seen as like to be the carer or to look after someone, whereas later on she's actually her own character. And so, the big kind of thing that happens at the end of this book, Angstrom Levy, the character that was set up earlier, calls Mark, and he has Mark's mom and brother captive. And when I was reading this might be one of my favourite parts in the entire series, this fight. This initial fight with Angstrom Levy, because Mark charges at him, and Angstrom Levy is just like creating portals to take him to other dimensions. So Mark ends up having to fight dinosaurs and then gets pulled through a portal bag. And then he gets pushed into the Marvel universe, and we don't see too much of him, but we see him hit the back of Dr. Octopus, and then we see him come back through another portal with webs on his back. And I think that leads into, is it Marvel Team Up 14 or 17? I think it's 14. But I would love to read that. I'm so annoyed that that's not collected in this, but I can't be too mad because it's such a great fight. And then he goes through another portal into a world of zombies, which I think that's going to be a reference to The Walking Dead, surely. Started at the same time as Invincible in 2003, and we just see Mark flying through all these, different worlds and different dimensions. It's so cool to see. It's such a great, interesting fight, and Mark's becoming more and more angry, and he's kind of unleashing his own Viltrumite rage. And so when Angstrom Levy pulls him through a portal, and they land in sort of like a desert area, Mark just beats the shit out of him, and he's covered in blood. And he kind of like takes a breath and like, almost like he blacks out. He's like, I thought you were stronger than that. And when I was reading this, and Mark's just left alone in this dimension, on his own after beating Angstrom Levy to death, covered in blood, I couldn't sleep. I was reading this in bed, and I was like, I have to read the next issue. And an old version of the Guardians of the Globe come through a portal led by Robot, and Mark just says, what happened to you guys? He doesn't know that they're an alternate dimension version of him. And so yeah, it's always awkward with something like that because you don't want to think it's a cop-out, and I guess it's not really, but it's strange because it's to have him in this issue, in this desert, contemplating just killing someone, and then to have a brand new version of the team just show up out of the blue. It's kind of like, I don't know. I did like it though, and I was glad, and I was worried when he came into this dimension and just got stranded there. So Mark goes to R, the tailor, and he finally reads his dad's book, and he thinks that it's sort of like a way to defeat the Viltrumites. And if you've read the rest of the story, you know how these books factor in, and so yeah, it's so good. And something that this book ends with that's so good is the sequids or sequids coming to Earth on this ship, and the Guardians of the Globe have to go and fight them, and Invincible is with them having to fight them. Meanwhile, the Lizard League are taking over, well, they're trying to take over Earth and launch nukes. So you have pretty much the Guardians of the Globe fighting them, and then whatever heroes are left to fight the Lizard League, who can't go into space, who can't breathe in space or form a shield around themselves. So it's really cool, really tense to see they're on this ship, and it's kind of like Alien, like they're all trying not to come into contact with these sequids, whilst just trying to have enough time for Robot to figure something out to do. And then you get this fight with the Lizard League, and I'm gonna say second most favourite Rexplode moment, and I'll talk about it in my Compendium 2 review, my favourite Rexplode bit, but this, I was reading this and it was so incredible. I'm hoping they do this in the show because it's such a good moment for Rexplode. He gets his arm bitten off, he gets shot in the head, and he still manages to take down the Lizard League. It's incredible. The guy bites off his arm and he charges it and blows up the guy's head. And then gets shot in the head but still carries on. And Britt turns up just in time to call Cecil to save Rexplode. And so when he was rescued by the future versions of the Guardians of the Globe, the old version of Eve told him that, she has feelings for him. And so he kind of knows that Eve has feelings for him. And now he's not with Amber anymore. And then somebody, all this is happening, so much world building going on. I feel like I'm just describing what's happening to you, but someone called Anissa comes to Earth and helps him take down this big kaiju thing. And so the reason she's come to Earth is to basically ask him to join the Viltrumite Empire again. And she's not really taking no for an answer. So she is so much stronger than him. She takes him down, and she sort of proposes that if he was to join the Viltrumite Empire, that they could kind of keep the peace in the world, but obviously that's not going to happen. The Viltrumites are a species that just want to take over. Later on she is in space, and Alan, who's now working for the Coalition of Planets, is fighting her, and he fights her, and he's so much stronger now that she thinks she's knocked him out, but she hasn't, and she takes him back to the prison where Nolan is. And so Alan meets Nolan, they kind of form this friendship. And it was really nice to see Nolan have a bit more humanity. It was nice to see him say things like he misses his wife and stuff. Obviously there's a lot more that happens in this book, but I don't want to go into every little thing, otherwise this video would be about an hour long. So that is my review for Invincible Compendium 1. I've kind of just talked about what happens in the book and talked about my thoughts on it and everything. But I really love this book, and there's some things that happen in this that I could have sworn happened later on in Compendium 2. As I say, I haven't read this since the first time I read through it, so I've only finished it recently, but maybe it's time for a reread already. So hopefully you like this video. If anyone did like it, please consider leaving a like down below and consider subscribing. It really helps me out, it helps the channel out, and it just helps the channel grow. So thank you. If anyone is still watching, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.